Our next speaker is a familiar face to CUNY SPS, and to introduce him, I'll turn it over to someone who has worked alongside him for 20 plus years. Please welcome the school's Chief Academic Officer, Dr. George Adi, our Senior Associate Dean of Academic Affairs. George?
Thank you, Carlos. I can't tell you how delighted I was when I heard that Ed knows that Ed had lined up John Moglescu as a speaker. No one seems to me to embody the entrepreneurial spirit better than John. To say that he does and how and why is trying to sum up something that can't be itemized. So I'm going to skip that standard route of introductions, listing biographical high points. John's signal accomplishment is that he could accomplish so much. He was always the guy to turn to, the one who could get it done, whatever it was. That's an amazing feat, and we have to ask why. Why every seed he planted grew, why every challenge he took on, however challenging, seemed an insight, a glorious opportunity, always destined for success. The key for me lies in what I think is the most important of John's accomplishments. It's what happened when he accepted Chancellor Matthew Goldstein's and Executive Vice Chancellor Louise Muir's invitation to create the School of Professional Studies. Never mind that the school would have to create every course and credential it offered from scratch, that it would have to pay its own way, that it would have to limit itself to the things a vast multi-campus university didn't already do. As if that wasn't enough, John was just standing up the new school when a new university provost, Selma Botman, said it should be the home of CUNY's first online degrees. The school now has 28 degrees, 2 launching just this fall, 1, not so incidentally, the Bachelor of Professional Studies in Business Management and Entrepreneurship. All were hatched under John's watchful eye, all are successful. He made it look easy, but it wasn't. If John thought something was worth doing, he said yes to it, but that was the only simple step. Once he got to the why, once he saw that something was worth doing, then he knew he'd have to figure out the how, and that was the hard part. That's where all the work was. Taking that on had to mean no detail was too small to escape notice, no potential problem too far off to diffuse, and no one more vigilant about such things than John. None of this was easy. None of it was magic. It was painstaking, literally. The secret, in a word, was commitment. Once John took something on, he would do whatever it took to see it through. The French verb entreprendre, to undertake or to take on, is in fact the root of the word entrepreneur. Once John had taken on the challenge of SPS and seen it through, he could circle back to the why, all that it was, all that it meant. Nothing moved John more than our graduates saying, as they so often do, that they couldn't have earned their degree anywhere but SPS. John brought into this cluttered world something genuinely new, and if you want a word for what that is, I can think of no better one than opportunity. I give you that entrepreneur par excellence, John Moglescu.
So, George, that's over the top. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. You took even a few points that I'm going to talk about when I go through my remarks. You know, it feels a bit weird to be here today, but great at the same time. Again, thanks, George. Thanks, Ed, and the rest of the team that organized the conference. I haven't seen Heather, but I know she's in the background and does it amazingly well. I see a lot of friends. I guess, you know, I just want to, you know, say I saw Lisa Sheridan and Shakima Williams Jones, our 2 amazing student leaders when I was there. And I, you know, I don't want to single them out, but I did. So I apologize to everybody else. I miss being around you guys, although I don't mind being retired. I will say that together we built a wonderful institution. And Ed and I spent a lot of time discussing what I should talk about. And truthfully, Ed just simply said, tell your story. And it's one that exemplifies entrepreneurship. Whether I think of myself for one or not, I now do. And that's what I'm going to do. For those of you who've been around me for a while, you've heard some of these stories before. But my apologies for that. And I think my story is only possible because of all the help I received along the way. It's truly a group story. And I want to just say that over and over again. But so here goes. And it's a long story. It's a 50-year story. I began my CUNY career 50 years ago in 1972. Hard to believe. I was a community organizing graduate student in social work from NYU who was given a 3-day-a-week field placement at New York City Community College in downtown Brooklyn in its division of adult and continuing ed. I was not a traditional academic, never became one, as a matter of fact. At the time, I knew little about what a community college did, even less about continuing ed. I went to meet my fieldwork supervisor and my life changed. Fanny Eisenstein was an incredible person, a dean, but former social worker and organizer. I talked to her for an hour, and again, I realized nothing was going to be the same with me. She assigned me to go into the Brooklyn House of Detention, a facility within walking distance of the college in downtown Brooklyn. It housed close to 2,000 men, almost all Black and brown, awaiting trial or some other resolution to their case. And my assignment for the year was to organize the jail's first education program. I developed a literacy high school equivalency program that I administered. During the student year, I wrote a grant to the state ed department. I don't think I had any thought that it would be funded, but it was. And I was hired as the program director. I had my first CUNY job, and I spent 3 years going into that jail every single day, and it changed my life. Worked 10 more years in continuing ed at the college and developed a whole lot of programs, literacy and GED for adults who didn't have a high school diploma, workforce training that would lead to jobs, programs for developmentally disabled, for seniors, and training for women in non-traditional occupations. All these programs were supported by outside funding, which we aggressively pursued, understanding that continuing ed didn't get any tax levy money, had to raise its own funding. I guess I had begun to be an entrepreneur, although at the time I didn't think I thought of one. Rather, I was someone who wanted to make the world a little better place and serve those New Yorkers who were the most disadvantaged, both economically and educationally. I learned so much from my time at the college with Fanny, and it had a huge influence on the rest of my career. And she was clearly my hero. And she told me a bunch of things that I took with me. She understood the importance of paying attention to detail. George said that. I've always done that and tried to say to everybody else, you need to do that. But at the same time, having vision. She started all meetings on time. Again, something I learned pretty well, and had no patience for anyone being late. Phone calls, no emails at the time, were to be returned the day received them, and program deadlines would be met. She stressed the importance of building relationships and treating everyone respectfully, never worried about academic credentials in her hiring. Hard to say that in an academic environment, and I'm not against credentials, obviously, but she rather looked for people who had ideas, intelligence, and passion. While she expected her staff to seek outside funding, getting funds was only the beginning. The program had to be run well. She also had humility and expected her staff to have a humility as well. She rarely took credit for the successful programs we developed or the funding we received. That was the work of her staff. Fanny encouraged us to take risks, to challenge the status quo, and to even have occasional failure, which gave us the feeling that we could take risks. She left the college. There was a mandatory retirement age at 70 at the time at CUNY. By then I was her deputy and kind of the inside candidate to replace her. Didn't get the job. Devastated at the moment. Turned out to be probably the best thing that ever happened to me. A year later, I went to the central office at CUNY. I was appointed to be the deputy to the then University Dean for Adult and Continuing Ed, a woman by the name of Regina Peruggi, and arrived in the central office in 1986, our system office. And we were responsible for overseeing all the non-credit programs at CUNY. We had a staff of about 8 people, largely involved in things like adult literacy and second language and GED programs for older youth and adults, had to raise our own money. Even my own job was a grant-funded position. I was not on a tax levy line. truthfully, outside of continuing ed, hardly anyone at CUNY even knew we existed. And that was a good thing because we had enormous freedom to do what we thought made sense as long as we could get as long as we could get funding. And so I probably should digress for a second. Regina was also an incredible boss. And I would say to all of the students, young people, or even many of my colleagues at SPS, I have really come to believe that when contemplating any new job, do your homework on who your direct supervisor will be. If your gut tells you that person is not a good fit for you, look elsewhere. I say that, I don't know, you don't need to listen exactly, but I really feel it's true. So we began aggressively to seek outside funding, and much of the funding was from the city and state. We quickly learned that CUNY had an advantage when getting city funding. We could enter into MOUs. We didn't have to go to bid, and that was a huge advantage. And every time we received a new MOU, a new grant from a private foundation, we hired new staff. And turned out we were really good at finding talent. And because our programs were largely grant funded, we have a bit more freedom as to who we would hire. Regina left to become a president of Marymount Manhattan in 1990. And I was asked to replace her as the university dean of continuing ed. And the next 8 years, we're in the 90s now, and I'm going to speed this up. We spent building new programs. We remained committed to serving both economically disadvantaged populations and very specifically people who did not have a college degree. We believed across the board in our unit that there was far too much inequality in this city, still is. We were committed to social justice and focused on serving communities and students of color. We also focused on building programs that would be responsive to the needs of the city and began building programs where education and social policy intersected. For example, we took advantage of changing national, state, and local welfare policy to work with the city to develop kind of a host of training programs for adults receiving public assistance, both credit and non-credit. And that whole area changed from the 90s, and then WEP came about and people had to go to work, and we always adapted and were able to get the city and HRA to continue to give us money. We developed programs for youth 16 to 24 and a host of programs in the area of workforce development. We focused on people with disabilities, particularly those who were direct care workers who didn't stay in their jobs. They were paid too low and the jobs were hard. And the 90s saw a huge expansion of our role. And by the end of that decade, we were bringing in tens of millions of dollars in grants and contracts. That staff of 8 had grown to a bit over 100. But that was truthfully, and I say this with humility, that was really only the beginning, because the next 15 years were even more amazing. It began with the arrival of a new chancellor, Matthew Goldstein, and a new executive vice chancellor, Louise Mira, again speaks to the importance of building relationships. I had known the chancellor from my early days at the central office. He had been an interim vice chancellor of academic affairs before he became president of Baruch. And Louise Mira, the new executive vice chancellor, we just seemed to click. And she liked us and she liked the responsiveness of our unit. I was given a new position of university dean for academic affairs and senior university dean for academic affairs, which made in some ways a name that didn't even fit me. I didn't have a doctorate and was hardly an academic, and yet that was my title. And our unit quickly became the go-to arm for the chancellor. In fact, David Kerp, in his book on the college dropout scandal a few years back, called us the skunk works unit of CUNY and beyond. And we began to become more visible to the rest of the university as the programs we developed received praise and attention. We really had become the innovative arm for CUNY. Don't have time to talk about, because I really want to get the Q&A going and make sure we have time. I don't really have enough time to discuss all the programs we developed, but I'm going to highlight some of them really quickly. Of course, the last one I'm going to talk about is building SPS, which was the highlight of my career. We greatly expanded the work with the public schools. That included expanding our College Now program from 2 to 17 campuses, enabling over 20,000 high school students from over 400 high schools annually to take free college credit classes. We worked with the Department of Ed, and we took responsibility for building 20 new early college high schools, as well as 3 new exam schools that are in existence today, thriving and wonderful places. President Obama came to one of them, PTech, which we did in cooperation with IBM. Those serve over 8,000 students a year. And the other programs we do with the Department of Ed, at the end of the year, we serve about 100,000 students or more. We opened a new school in the Bronx called CUNY Prep that we ran ourselves. We raised money and we ran ourselves for 300 students who had left the public school system before earning a high school diploma. And it still exists today. We got money that baselined into the budget of the university, and it's an oasis in the Bronx. We work with the New York Police Department, created a program, and I must say that actually we train new police officers to be more sensitive, working with communities of color. Obviously, still lots of work to do there, but it was an interesting, exciting project. We brought 2 new cultural organizations to CUNY, one called Harmony and the other Creative Arts Team that gave elementary school kids the opportunity to play music, trained by professionals, developed relationships with the New York Philharmonic as well as other major musicians. And we brought theater to high school and middle school students as well. We formed our own production company and created a television series to help immigrants improve their English language skills. It was called We Are New York. And then We Speak New York. It covered 2 administrations, the de Blasio administration and Bloomberg administration. We won 2 Emmys for the series, and I became executive producer of a TV production company, which made no sense at all, but it was interesting and exciting. Starting with a tiny class around the conference room table, we changed the way the university looked at remediation. The program called CUNY Start began with 12 students, now serves close to 3,000 students. Those students are the least academically prepared students who enter CUNY. We got involved with early childhood education. Our Early Childhood Professional Development Institute started with a staff of 5 or 6, has expanded to over 125 staff, working to improve the quality and care of the working conditions for people in the early childhood field. The PDI, as we call it, provides a range of professional development activities all over New York State. This year, they'll generate over $30 million in outside funding, and Sherry Cleary, the director of that program for us, became the chair of the Governor's Advisory Board on Early Child Ed, and also one of the major advisors to the de Blasio administration for the pre-K program. We helped establish the 311 call center. You know, when you call 311, we were in on ground zero with that program, enabling hundreds of CUNY students to work part-time for the 311 program and earn a lot of experience, paid experience, customer service experience. After Hurricane Sandy devastated the city, we were asked to build a CUNY Service Corps. We created a program that placed over 800 students in paid internships at close to 100 community-based organizations. You know, in not that recent, a couple of years ago, the hurricane hit Puerto Rico. We sent a group of students to Puerto Rico to rebuild houses and roofs. In 2006, we were asked by the chancellor to develop a paper that would lead to the creation of a new community college at CUNY. It's first new college in 43 years. 5 years later, we put a team together really quickly. 5 years later, Gutman Community College opened. It's on 40th Street between 5th and 6th Avenue, wonderful place, terrific success. And then we addressed the low graduation rates at CUNY's community colleges, created probably our most well-known program called ASAP. It's really the most successful community college program in the country. It started with 1,100 students. It has grown to 25,000 students, more than doubled the graduation rate at the 9 CUNY colleges participating. Started with $19 million from Mayor Bloomberg, and when de Blasio came in, CUNY gives him a new mayor, the laundry list of everything they want. He threw out everything but ASAP and gave us $80 million in our operating budget to expand the program. And finally, in 2002, we were asked by the chancellor to build a school that would serve only adults. And George gave a little bit of background there. I'm going to give a little bit more. And again, I guess with all that I've said, SPS is the highlight of my career. So Louise Mirror and I attended a conference at Johns Hopkins on adult education. On the train ride back, she suggested we need a new school for adults that would be nimble more than anything we have at the university now. She pitched the idea to the chancellor. He agreed, asked me to put a team together and become its founding dean. He also said to keep the dean's position at the central office at the same time. So I now was the dean of the CUNY School of Professional Studies and the dean in the central office as well. I think George said he offered no dollar support, no space, no staff, only he wanted the program to be and the school to be nimble and innovative and serve adults. We put a team together and it was made up of existing staff who were already working on other projects in our central office. And a year later, we opened. I don't know if we had any business opening, but we did open. And we opened with one certificate program. It was for public elementary school teachers who had to learn a new literacy curriculum. One program hardly made us a school, but we did enroll over 300 students. Originally, huge opposition to SPS from the faculty union, some college presidents, other faculty who thought we would compete with them and steal students. To lessen their concern. Originally, we said we would not build degree programs and only enroll students in credit and non-credit certificate programs. Obviously, that did not hold. And it didn't hold because in 2006, Selma Botman, as George stated, asked us to build CUNY's first online degree programs. We accepted the challenge. The university changed the agreement that said we could only build certificate programs. And the first program was called Communication and Culture. George and a host of talented CUNY faculty from all over the university created the degree. 2 years later, we added our business program, which Ed Knox ultimately came in charge of. And each subsequent year, we built 1 or 2 degrees. And knowing how CUNY is with building degrees, the fact that we would build 1 or 2 new degrees every year was extraordinary. And by 2022, we now have, and I still say we, by the way, with all due respect to Dean Silva Prioris, we had 28 degree programs. We had initially space at the graduate school, but we were nomads. We had a seat classroom space, inside CUNY, outside CUNY. We rented space in school buildings. A number of nonprofits got 2 floors of leased space at 875 6th Avenue. Finally did get a dedicated space, which is our home at 119 West 31st Street. And from 2006 on, we steadily grew our enrollment. And since up to the beginning of COVID, never had a year that our enrollment did not increase over the prior year. From that start of 300 students, I don't know, I think it's about 4,300 degree students now. And then we also, I had huge interest, and so did others, in growing grants and contracts, and largely non-credit and serving New York City workforce. We provided professional career development to I think it was last year, it might have been over 40,000 New Yorkers who were trained in a variety of programs by us through our professional education workforce learning unit, which we call PUEL, which generates over, I don't know, $35 million in grants and contracts. And I think it makes it the kind of the 5th or 6th largest granting entities in the university. I'm almost done also, but I'm going to leave you with some parts. I said, I guess I need to mention our online ranking. Obviously, that we are proud of that we're top 10 in the country by US News in our BA programs, that we graduated over 1,000 students last year in our degree program. I think that's about right. And we had so many accomplishments. And by the time I left central office, the staff in the central office of our unit, which was called originally this, well, I don't even need to say that, was 350. And together with SPS, that unit SPS generated close to a quarter of all the outside grants and contracts from the 24 other colleges of CUNY combined, which I think is a pretty amazing figure. I think the total amount we generated from 2000 to 2015 was $1.3 billion, which again is pretty extraordinary. So why were we so successful? And this speaks to kind of some of my, as George said, a few things, and our speakers earlier talked about some of these things, and I so appreciated you know, the words of both of them, Commissioner Doris and Dr. Gibbs. I wish we had more time, but I'm going to just go through 10 or 15, no, I don't know, a number of points that I will make. We always said yes to opportunity, never said no. Even if we didn't believe we had the expertise as staff, I always believed that in New York City you could find people, and we did. We paid careful attention to the hiring process. It was the most important thing we did. We hired people with ideas and who had passion. They could not only develop a new program, but knew how to implement, administer, and oversee it. They also understood the importance of assessing and measuring program outcomes and setting bold goals. You know, at the central office, we ultimately developed an evaluation unit of 40 people, all paid through soft money, through the grants that we got. As I said earlier, formal credentials were not essential. They were helpful, but not essential. It was okay to hire people smarter than you are. They make you look good. Staff had to be willing to accept new assignments, even if they're not exactly part of their existing portfolio. We wanted staff who saw a challenge, who saw a new challenge as an opportunity, and that it would be fun to do it. And I would say working hard was a given. We took risks, understanding that not everything we did would be successful. We were fortunate for most of the years at CUNY. We were encouraged to take risks. We just had so many, you know, I had a whole bunch of good chancellors and executive vice chancellors who did that. We pushed against the status quo, believing that CUNY was not as good as it needed to be. It needed to get better. And again, it was important to build relationships. We got a lot of criticism. Everything we did was initially criticized. Gutman, SPS, ASAP, we just kind of ducked under it. We knew we had our back covered by the chancellor, and you know, it wasn't that we were pushovers. We would respond to criticism, but we didn't take it personally. We just moved on. And then the last couple of points, we didn't blame students. Our students often, it was a given that so many of them, particularly the ones that we were dealing with from the community, into the community colleges, came from low-income backgrounds. They often had, you know, were not fully prepared to do college level work. That was a given. Our challenge was to figure out how to help them succeed. And we never got bogged down with blaming the students or kind of saying that it was their circumstances that prevented a graduation rate that was as bad as it could possibly have been 25 years ago at the community colleges, for example. And if a program wasn't succeeding, we tried to change it. And, you know, and again, we ran quality programs. And because we did, city agencies came back to us over and over again. It didn't matter which mayor was in business. We survived through, I don't know, 5 or 6 mayors and 7 chancellors, because they knew that if they gave us something to do, we would do it well. We tried to be responsive to the needs of our students. As I learned early in my career, emails, phone calls, texts, requests to meet had to be responded to quickly, and every complaint had to be addressed. And I you know, people around this, it's not around the table, but here know that we took that really seriously. And we you know, so we used our funding creatively and managed our budget carefully. We established bold goals. And I think I can say this, I hope this is true. I encouraged staff to challenge my own views and tried to create an environment that was open and secure, that people could push me as hard as they could and say, no, you don't know what you're talking about. You're doing it wrong. And we had, heated conversations, both at SPS and at the central office, about ways to do things. And again, I hope that people were not fearful because of power and position that they couldn't have spoken up. I certainly had a group of people that were that way. So talking to me about my time at CUNY, Ed Knox said I was a serial entrepreneur. I don't know, and maybe I was. I always thought of myself as an educator, but I accept that as a compliment. And I would say that for 35 years, the staff and I never stopped building new programs. So I guess that makes us a serial entrepreneur, providing opportunities of the students. And I think perhaps most importantly, we redefine the role of an urban public higher education institution to include the importance of responding to the overall needs of the city it resides in and of its residents. I could have given you 30 other examples of us being responsive, from a Staten Island ferry crash and on to incidents like Abna Louima and Amadou Diallo, horrible police incidents. And we just wanted to respond, and we wanted to redefine what makes a great urban university. Our success was a group effort, clearly a group effort. I was surrounded by wonderful colleagues, many in the audience today. I am hugely grateful to all of you for helping us build this school, and for the students who took a risk on a new school. And I would like to entertain, we have a bunch of time, and that was purposeful, to talk and answer questions and enter into conversations, because you don't think of higher ed as entrepreneurial often. You have lots of progressive thinkers, but I always say absolutely too many resistant to change. And so, how we accomplish this, I think, is a good story, and it is a story that is, as I said in the beginning, a group story. So thanks very much. It's great to see everybody again. I know our school will continue to thrive. And Ed, let's turn it back to you, and hopefully you will feel free to ask me whatever you on your mind, and challenge anything that I said as well. So
yeah, I want to encourage all of you who are participating into this to do ask questions. John made that very clear, that he wanted to hear questions from the audience. So I'm going to start with one that speaks to this issue of what motivates you. And this question comes from Lisa. You spearheaded so many progressive and innovative education programs. Beside your bosses, where did you find the inspiration for these programs that had virtually no template?
Well, I kind of go back. I don't want to go back too far, but clearly my family background would start with that. But Fanny was my inspiration. So right off the bat, and I had just taught elementary school for 3 years, the hardest thing I did when I first got out of college. And so I saw unfairness everywhere. It just seemed to me, here I taught elementary school in a very poor neighborhood in the city, didn't know what I was doing, but observed, kind of unfairness as far as I was concerned about, the kids and resources, and then spent 3 years in this jail every day and listening to people. And I was up in the day rooms, on the floors. That's where our school was. We had a school floor that was directly, I would wake the people who were being detained up in the morning to say that it's time to go to school, and we would talk, and so I learned a whole lot about myself and what was going on. And then, I went to continuing ed, and continuing ed, it wasn't leisure time continuing ed. It was a continuing ed sense that we were going to change society, and we were going to change New York, and we're going to change education. And then we were really good at picking talent and surrounding ourselves with people. I am not a great idea person, but I was surrounded by people who were incredible idea people. and going back 30, 40 years. And we worked together for 20 and 30 years. And, you know, guys, people you don't know, name John Garvey, you know, Leslie Oppenheim, brilliant thinkers. And Kate would always say, John, what do you think about this? You know, we have to address, there's a long ESL waiting list in the city, and the city needs us to make movies. We don't know anything about making movies. So all of these things combined, and then it was consistent with my own beliefs, and it was a lot of fun. I liked challenges. And for those of you who know me, I'm really insecure. I'm a worrier. I think that's probably why I pay so much attention to detail. So Ed, it was part of who I was, I guess. I hated the idea that we had huge numbers of adults, almost 1 million, who didn't have a high school diploma, and many of them who were at levels of literacy below 5th grade. How is that possible? How is it possible that you have so many people who work, but at jobs that they can't afford housing and can't live in this city? How is that possible? And it was our responsibility as an urban, huge university to address these issues, and I did my best. It's a little long-winded answer, Ed, but.
No, it's a great discussion. While we're waiting on other comments, I'm wondering, at what point did you get comfortable with your ability to take an idea and move it? I mean, you certainly you are a serial entrepreneur, 15 plus things, but at what point did you realize that you could do this and your comfort level went up so you were able to get on new ideas and move them forward?
Yeah. I don't know. It took a long time. I mean, we had a lot of success. We had a few failures too, but we had a lot of success. And what I found is that as I got increasingly positions of greater authority, I found it wasn't harder. It made it a little bit easier because you had greater control over what you were doing. And so I think probably by I don't know, by the time Matthew Goldstein came on in the late 1990s, I had a feeling that we were okay, but I never became comfortable, Ed. I mean, up to he asked us to start SPS, and there was nothing there. We had no blueprint. We didn't have Gutman. We took 4 years to plan Gutman. SPS, they wanted to start in a year. ASAP, within a year. We built 3 new public schools, exam schools, and whether you think they're a good idea or not, in 5 months from the day that Mayor Bloomberg asked us. The School of American Studies up at Lehman College, and one at City and one at York in math and science. We just put our mind to it and said we're going to get it done. And we had this huge staff of people. So I could, I hate to say this, but I could pluck people from one grant and say, for 6 months would you like to help us build a new community college? Tracy Mead was the leader of that project, and she did an amazing job of leading it. And she's a super idea person and really smart. So I don't know. I never got that comfortable at. As you know, I worry my head off, and maybe that's a terrible thing, but it was who I was. I got more confident as we went on. I will say that.
Yeah, and that's the point I was hoping that you make. The more you get involved in it, the more comfortable you become. There is a question.
You never get complacent, though, Ed. You never think that it's going to be easy.
Right. One of the attributes of a good entrepreneur is that they're very good in terms of being communicative. How did you see that in your practice in all of them? I think I heard you talk a little bit about how you dealt with people, and I'd like for you to speak to that a little bit.
I like to get to know people. I thought it was important for me to get to know staff. I wanted to let them know that I'm aware that they're important to the organization. I hope people will agree with me. You know, I think in one of the videos that was made for my retirement, I don't know if it was Brian Peterson or someone who talked about my walkabouts. You know, I like to walk the building. I'd like to see people who I never see. I like to thank them for the work they're doing. You know, I can be tough, you know, and I can challenge people, but I also think of myself as someone who is only successful by the people who are doing the work. And so I made an effort in communicating that I'm a human being. I think that I have worries, that you know, I'm not looking for people to reveal their inner secrets to me, but you know, if you hear something that may be going on that's difficult, you know, you want to ask about it, and you want people to feel that you care about them. And I think I did this. I guess I have a lot of people here who would say yes or no to that. But I also felt I tried to treat people respectfully, and that, you know, that doesn't mean that I wouldn't get into disagreements and arguments. But I found, and particularly in our work with city government, you know, commissioners come and go and administrations come and go. And I would talk every couple of years and always say, we'll be important to this administration as well. And it turned out we did. So I don't know, Ed. I mean, I in terms of communicating, I tried to do it in a more personal way with not invading on people's turf. And respecting that, but so let me stop. I see there's some other questions.
There's a great question from Bonnie. There's one I'm trying to process to make it a little smaller. But Bonnie asked this question: how do you navigate social justice goals with bottom line pressures? How did you manage not to abandon the social justice goals?
Why should I? I mean, you know, there's consistent. You know, how do you not, is it a social justice goal to try and figure out how to get low wage workers out of low wage work? I was on numerous city task forces, mayor's task force about that. We never quite figured it out. But you had to continue to try listening. You know, I worked very closely with small business services, you know, and obviously the commissioner here today is so familiar with that. And you know, this is what we were interested in doing. So it wasn't that ever we had to abandon it. We sought out, and in fact, many of the private funders, whether we got money from Robinhood or Lumina or Petrie or any of the foundations, that's what they were interested in. So it wasn't that hard. You simply, you know, figured out what was of interest. And you know, and I hate to say this, when we started thinking about ASAP, and I'll give you this quick story, the 3-year graduation rate for community college students at CUNY, 3-year for 2-year degree programs, was 11%. 11%, okay? Chancellor Goldstein went to the mayor and said, I need some money, I'm gonna take that on. And the mayor said, what graduation rate are you gonna get? And he said 50%. And he came back with $19.5 million, and then brought me and a couple of other people together and said, I just promised the mayor 50%, and can we do that? And I said, I have no idea, but we'll give it a try. Now, we cheated a little bit. We started the program with people who didn't need remediation, and we got 54% in a pilot of 1,100 students. But then we changed and brought people in who were really underprepared. And is that a social justice issue? Yeah, I think so. That you know, 9 out of 10 students coming in at that time were not graduating in 3 years. A group more graduated in 6 years, but the longer it took, the longer you didn't get to where you went. So to Bonnie, it was absolutely where we wanted to be. And I was surrounded by people who were not interested in certain aspects of, you know, we weren't interested in Macaulay. That doesn't mean Macaulay was not a great program. We just weren't interested in it. And so we approached, things with what we wanted to do. And we had the non-credit form beginning wise. And then we just changed the thinking that the degree side equally important to deal with this.
There's a question. Thank you, John. There's a question about advice on how one would sort of enter into some of the things that you're doing and that you have done in your career. They too are a serial entrepreneur, and I want to make sure I'm getting right for I think it's Tony Burgess, and I would offer that we could unmute you to pose your question, but it seems like they're looking more for advice on when they graduate, how could they get involved in some of the higher education or elementary to high school, college career sort of endeavors that you seem to have undertaken.
So, as you look for your jobs, as you look for, search for opportunities that would be in that area, you have to see where it's happening, both at a central office and then at all of our colleges. I would say now pretty much not every, but most of our colleges, even our four-year colleges and more flagship, in quotes, colleges, have some commitment to the community and have programs that are involved.
Mm-hmm.
If you know people, you begin to talk to people. You apply for jobs, which blindly is tough because a lot of people are committed in this town who want to work with these kinds of programs.
Mm-hmm.
And you try and figure out what you have to offer. What is my selling point to a person? What makes me unique when you apply for a job that may have 75 other applicants who are applying? And of course, it always helps to know somebody who knows somebody who can at least get you in the front door, which sometimes is important to do. Rely on, if you're an SPS student, rely on us a bit, and push us to be helpful. So I don't know. And I was lucky. I was given a field placement that changed my life. And I don't know. So I just think you have to be assertive and aggressive and not get discouraged when you don't get, things, and then try and figure out what the landscape is. There's a huge community-based network of programs in this city that does really interesting work, and then higher ed as well. So I don't know if that's helpful, Tony, or not, but
and that has a lot to do with that certain attribute of being communicative, the ability to network, the ability to talk to people, and sort of make sure you understand who the players are and how they can be beneficial. But John, in your talk, you mentioned a little bit about risk, and I'm wondering how you dealt with the risk issue inside an organization.
Yeah.
That would be.
So, and there were different phases of that, Ed. One, you have to know who your boss is. You need to understand that this person is risk adverse, and he's going to not be happy if you take a risk that doesn't work. I was hugely fortunate. I had a series of people that like to take risks themselves and rewarded risk. And Chancellor Goldstein was the visionary. His period between 1998 and 2000, whatever, 12 and 13, and I reported directly to him for a lot of that time, and he never flinched. He never didn't back me up. And so if I came to him with an idea, he basically said, "Go for it." And once I got to SPS, well, I no longer had that risk because I was accountable to the school. And look, we did some things that didn't work as well. And we had some struggles along the way, but it just seemed, first, it was challenging. It made it fun. And after a point, I thought, and one other thought. I had a couple of incredible idea people, but they would give me 10 ideas a week and 9 of them were terrible. And we would laugh about that. And I would go with, we would try and sort it out in a group and go with that one that was really, really good and that had a good chance of succeeding. And over the years, our track record became really good. And so we didn't worry about failure. We were going to be successful. We were going to build a community college that was going to be different. We were going to build a school for adults that was going to be different. Now, we got huge pushback, but my boss always had my back, and so we ducked under it. We responded. We took on folks. For those of you who were in our early SPS governing council meetings, you wouldn't believe it. You just would not believe it. Screaming and arguing because of the way we were set up. We have a much better structure today, and it's risk became, not a risk. It became a challenge and fun. And we wanted to change the city and we wanted to change the university. I was asked by one of our former chancellors, if you look back on your career, do you think, even though you've you've helped bring to scale many, many programs, did you change the overall culture of CUNY? And I've thought a lot about that. And I said, well, I've been part of building, a couple of new schools and lots of programs, but I don't believe I've changed the sense of the culture. And maybe that's a good thing, but she was interested in that. And again, Ed, until you really talk to me, people have thought of me as an entrepreneur. I would thought of myself more of an agent of change and an organizer, but I guess those are in some ways synonymous. So are there other questions?
I don't see any others, but I do want to continue on with that particular point.
Yeah.
Knowing that you were sort of inspired to take risks, how did you, in your role, inspire those under you to take risks?
I hope, and one, you should ask them, but one, I would hope that they realized that if it didn't work quite as well as we thought, I wasn't going to kill them. I wasn't going to blame them. I had agreed that this is a good thing to do, and we just did it. I mean, when we started, we didn't know about the grants world, but we also made it a sense that at the central office where we were, that if you came into a leadership position, you were expected to generate money. Well, 90% of us were on soft money. And just one quick story, which, when I was asked to be the dean of continuing ed after Regina left, the vice chancellor came to me and said, "We're going to make you dean, but can you pay your own salary?" And I was a little taken aback, but I said yes. I was confident even there, that was 1990, that we would manage that. We didn't have the kind of grants we had later, but we would manage that. So was that fair for them to say to me? Maybe. Was that stupid of me to agree? Perhaps, but I don't know. I just liked what I was doing, and I thought it was an opportunity. So the people, I hope that people who worked with me when they brought an idea thought that just as people had my back, that I would generally have their back as well. And it didn't mean that we didn't make mistakes. Occasionally we would, and we also were not very good at predicting how many students we were going to get. I had these lofty goals of how many students we get, and we came pretty close to doing that, but we never could predict how many students accurately would come for this program versus that program. But I think I didn't want to have just 4 programs, and it didn't make sense. And so we knew that, and then we knew some programs were going to be smaller, and that's okay if you're going to run a school.
There's a question in the chat that actually sort of is aligned to what you're saying in terms of risk. And that question is, can you speak to how you bounce back from failure? A lot of folks are afraid to try because they're afraid to fail. But
Okay,
they want to
let
know.
me give you an example. Okay. When we were asked by the city to do these TV shows, to develop, to make movies, we got a lot of money to do it. We got $5 million to do it. And we were going to develop, I don't know, 15 half-hour episodes based on real life stories of immigrants and their experience to teach language skills and access to city services. And we hired a big-time director, producer, and he hired big-time writers to write the first script. And we did a pilot. And we had a viewing of the pilot. And it was truly awful. It was horrible. It was embarrassing. It was hostile to certain groups. We had spent $300,000 on this pilot. And I saw myself in the New York Post, that we were gonna, oh my goodness. And I was working with city government at the same time. They were very unhappy about this pilot. So, we took stock. We truly got rid of the director producer guy. And we hired a filmmaker who happened to be the head of the film department at City College, who had made movies in his career. And he hired a what do you call it, a showrunner, whatever. And we wrote the scripts ourselves. We had talented people who were educators, and the educators originally didn't get along with the writers. And so we combined them, and they wrote the scripts. And they were really good at it because they understood language development, and they were also creative writers. And so we wound up with an Emmy for one of our stories, and then got three others in the next administration, two others in the next administration. And you try and recover. Sometimes you close something down also. Sometimes it just doesn't work. But this one, we had to salvage it. And there are things that, the CUNY Prep story. CUNY Prep, we opened a school. John Garvey came to me and he said, we should open a school in the Bronx, for out-of-school youth. And we can run a model school. And we hired a incredibly gifted 29-year-old brilliant educator, communicator, Derek Griffith, who there was something about him that was extraordinary. And the first year was a disaster. We didn't know what we were doing. And we spent that summer, reviewing, assessing, and Derek was devastated. And we came back and we changed the school, and it's now, it's up on White Plains Road, and it is a wonderful place for 300 kids who did not make it for lots of different reasons. And Derek, unfortunately, I don't even need to go there, but tragically, actually, he was killed in the Philadelphia Amtrak train crash. But it was an extraordinary person, and so we recovered from a horrible first year, and we learned about how to run a school. Now, were we arrogant to think we could run a out of school high school for youth right out of the central office? Maybe, but we also had a lot of people who thought we should do it. And then we were able to get money from DYCD and ultimately from it was baselined into, to save the program, we went down to City Hall and brought 200 kids to demonstrate in front of City Hall. But it was planned. And we then got the city to baseline the program. So you try and recover.
One additional question. Was there any time in any of the ideas that you were moving forward that there was some sort of crossroad where you had to just stop and take pause and decide if you would move forward?
Yes. yes, George can relate to this particular. I'm not going to give the details, but we had a partnership with an outside entity, a very prominent entity in history, and at SPS to build a program that would be a master's for people who teach middle school and high school teaching, using some of the most prominent historians in the United States to give introductory lectures and things like that. And it was with an agency, an organization, the Gilder Lehrman Institute, which had, involvement with schools in all over the United States. And this program was to provide history training to people and history teachers in Alabama, and North Dakota, and California. And we got into a big to-do with CUNY's history professors. And it was very, very stressful. And I don't need to go into all of the details. And we ultimately said, we can't do it. There's too much opposition and we can't do it. It turned out that they then went to PACE. And I think initially they had 500 graduate students all over the country taking this master's program. And I saw 2 weeks ago that they just signed a new agreement with Gettysburg University to do the same thing, a master's program. But we lost out. But I felt that at the time that there was too much opposition, and it was taking too much of our energy and stress, and it was stressful. So we shut it down, and we had spent, I don't know, over a year, if not more, on putting this together. And truthfully, they identified some of the great historians in the United States to be involved in some of this activity. And yet, now some people might tell a different story about this, but that I don't think George would be one of them. So
another question, you mentioned that you're not an ideas person.
Well, I would say I'm not a brilliant ideas person. I rely on a lot of people. I'm not terrible at it, but I
So how did a number of the ideas come about? Was that because of how you looked at the market, or how your team looked at things?
Yeah.
Where did those innovations seem to sort of percolate up?
They came from all over the place. I mean, they came from the chancellor, who I was talking to the former chancellor the other day, and this is kind of a funny story even. I mean, right after Hurricane Sandy, he was at his cabinet meeting. I happened to be on his cabinet at the time, and he announced that he wanted to do something for people who were victims of Hurricane Sandy in this city, and do something that would help the city. And it turned out it was going to be a service corps, a CUNY service corps. And as he was speaking, the then executive vice chancellor for finance and operations, Alan Dobrin, caught my eye and asked me to come outside the room. And I went outside, and he said, would you lead this? And we walked back in, and he announced to the chancellor that John has agreed to lead it. Now, to this day, I thought that was spontaneous. But when I spoke to the chancellor the other day, he said it was all contrived. Dobrin and I had talked. I probably shouldn't tell this story, but so the ideas came. Now, so some came from the chancellor. Louise Mira was an incredibly brilliant idea person. I mean, she's now the president of the New York Historical Society, and if you know anything about that place, she has totally changed that institution. In fact, approached us for the museum studies a master's degree. It was her idea, and I knew Louise and said, of course, let's do it. And so we built a museum studies program, and you could, every one of those and some of them came from City Hall. City Hall would come to us and say, we need this, or some would come from a foundation like Robin Hood, and because we were noted that we were going to deliver, and then some came from ourselves. Bill Ebenstein was a guy who just Mariette Bates was a result of Bill Evanstein's, in getting her involved in higher ed and giving us seed money to do developmental disabilities programs. Bill also seeded our nursing programs. He was the one who brought Joanne Lavin and Marge Riley to our doorfront and gave us money to build those programs. I don't know if any nurses are on this call, but a year or two to build the programs. So the idea, occasionally they were my ideas too, but generally they came from others, and you try to sort out which were important, and often they came with incredibly short time frame. Mayor Bloomberg on these new exam schools came to us in April, wanted 3 new schools, that would be like Stuyvesant and Bronx Science in 5 months. And in return, he was going to give CUNY Governor's Island and to run programs on Governor's Island. So, you can't turn the mayor down. We put a group together and we killed ourselves to get these 3 schools, and you had to do construction stuff too. And we never did get Governor's Island, by the way. It never happened. So I don't know, Ed. I mean, it's just I'm looking at Linda's risk taking is so much harder now because everyone wants to. I didn't see the end of that, but to Matt, I don't know what it said, but I don't know if it's harder now or not. Maybe it is, and a lot of people are risk averse.
Yeah.
And Fanny always told me you need people who have ideas and passion, and I never forgot that. I think she was quoting Gershwin, but I don't know. So
we have just a few more minutes, but there's one question I do want to ask from one of out of the chat, and this is from Anthony Stearns, and he says that he writes in the area of professional competence and discompetence. Do you see a role for SPS providing a role in career extension? And I think to some extent.
So I have shied away from giving SPS advice on where it should go. If people ask me privately, I'm happy to talk to them, but I feel that not a good idea. I was the founding dean. I was here for 19 years or whatever, and my time is done. And I'm not trying to avoid the question, Ed, but
I agree.
I just think that it kind of is a little, I don't want to do it. So let me end with a kind of in terms of a little. Can I end with a story? Are we pretty well done?
Yes. We have 4 minutes. You do your thing.
Okay. So this may take. Do I have an opinion on charter versus public as feeders to colleges? Let me quickly answer that because I've thought a lot about that, and I've had very stimulating conversations with friends of mine, colleagues, on the left, which I consider myself one as well, by the way, although I think there's a far more nuance and gray than some people do. It depends on the quality of the school. If I were living in certain neighborhoods and I had a choice between a charter school, public charter school that really worked and a neighborhood school that didn't, and it's my kid, I'm going to pick the charter school. Now, I understand the threat to public education, if there are too many. And so, I'm very careful about that. But who am I to judge, a parent's view of trying to get the best possible school for one of his or her children? And so, and some of them have come because of failure, and some of them have come because of opportunity. I'm not a big fan of for-profit schools and at all. I'm just not, and particularly in the college level, those proprietary schools that have been so destructive and left people with so much debt. But I think the charter debate is complicated. And I think that what we need is more good schools. So let me end with this one story, if I might, okay? Because it speaks to my mentor, and this will only resonate if you saw the movie. And some people have heard it, but in terms of why I had such an important mentor, and so this woman, Fanny Eisenstein, one of the staff, 10 years after I started there, was reading a memoir written by Arthur Lawrence. Arthur Lawrence he wrote the screenplay for West Side Story. He was a playwright. He was a director. He was a brilliant guy, and he's writing his memoir. And he did the movie The Way We Were, starring Robert Redford and Barbara Streisand. Now, for people of my generation, it was an important movie. It was kind of warm and lovely. And he said he's walking with Barbara Streisand and trying to figure out the character that she is going to play. And then it hits him that he now has his character. And it goes back to 1935 at Cornell, where he is a student, and maybe a junior or senior, and there is this fiery radical who is organizing a demonstration against the rise of fascism and what's going on in Franco's Spain, if those of you who know some history. And she was fiery and articulate and a great communicator as a freshman at Cornell. It turned out that was Fanny. That was the person who became my mentor. And she never said a word to us about it. She never said that she was the figure that Barbara Streisand's character was based on. And it's why I felt so fortunate to have, and she never became less fiery. She entered higher ed when she was 58 years old. She had been a social work organizer before that. And someone who was the dean of continuing ed at City Tech decided to hire her. She had never been in higher ed in her life, but there was something magical about her. So I don't know. Whatever. I miss you guys. I really do. I hope you're doing well. I think we had a great run, and I'm hopeful that things will continue to, be well. I'm trying to relax and play a little bit more tennis.
Well, I want to thank you for sharing that. I think it was a rich discussion. I think it helped us understand what the entrepreneur is, and I hope those who are here and not looking to start on their own, that they understand that they can sort of actualize great ideas internally. And I think your discussion about risk, your discussion about passion, your discussion about creativity, and being highly motivated to achieve was well.
One last thing, if I could give a little bit of advice, which is, I'm a great worrier, and it's okay for you to feel anxious about things that you are asked to do or things that you want to do. To me, it's perfectly normal, and it doesn't reveal weakness. It just doesn't. I had lots of moments, fear of speaking publicly, and things that I tried to overcome. But it's okay. We're none of us are perfect. And what I've learned as I've gotten more and more responsible positions is that they're great commissioners, a few. They're kind of good commissioners, a few. There's some average and there's some mediocre. And I would say the same about college presidents and deans, and we all are not perfect. And so, just try, don't worry if you have second thoughts about whether you feel you're as good as you really are. My guess is you probably are. So it's nice to see everybody. And I guess, am I done, Ed, now?
A great segue into our next sessions, but thank you so much, and can't wait to read your memoirs. So do inform us about that. John, thanks a million. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Ed. See you later.